I'd like to start this first real video to this new channel with a polemic, or rant, if you will. Why not? I seem to be dead set on eliminating followers before I even have any, so let's start on a controversial note, shall we? It's cold today. I can see my own breath. So I'd like to talk about some advice which is commonly given to authors when they've finished their drafting process. This is given by writers, it's given by editors, it's given by a great many different professionals in the field, and it's often given as if it's a thing to be taken for granted. Namely, that when you finish your first draft, you should tie it up with the strings, put it in a box, put that box into another bigger box, put that bigger box into a bigger steel lock box, lose the combination altogether, throw the whole thing in the sea, and then walk away for about 6 months. Maybe with a chain attached to it or something so that you can haul it back up later. But in any case, the idea is that you put your manuscript away for a very long period of time and you just stop thinking about it, you stop obsessing over it, and you let it be. This advice is given for a lot of different reasons. Seems to be smoke coming out of my fireplace. I better fix that. And I'm back, just needed a little encouragement. So, this advice is given with a lot of different purposes in mind. First of all, the idea is that you want to get some kind of emotional detachment from your work. You're too involved in your work, and you need to step away from it a little bit to be able to look at it a little bit more objectively. The idea is that you can get some perspective on what you've written. You can step back and, as they say, see your work with fresh eyes. And this advice is given to address some real problems. When you've read your manuscript dozens and dozens of times, the text of it has been burned into your eye sockets to the point that you're not even seeing your actual manuscript anymore when you read. You're actually reading the text that's been written into your eyes. You can't see simple errors any longer. Misspellings, punctuation that's placed where it shouldn't be, names that are spelled differently from place to place. You can no longer identify with any kind of neutrality or impartiality whatsoever which passages you really want to keep and which passages you want to get rid of, which passages you've developed a kind of ridiculous emotional and sentimental attachment to for no particular reason, and which passages are actually legitimately vital to your work. You have, as they say, lost the plot. All of this is true. These are real difficulties that we writers face when we're trying to revision and redraft our work, and they need to be dealt with some way or other. And the proposed solution? Just pretend like you never wrote it for a couple of months and see what happens. All right, so that's being a little bit facile, of course. I mean, the advice is a little bit more complex than that. It's a little bit more nuanced. But the idea really is that you just simply need to step away from your work, and when you come back to it, you're going to be able to see it a little bit better than before. This has not been my experience, and I know that it's not the experience of many authors that I've met, so I want to try and talk through this a little bit. What's wrong here? The authors and the editors who give this advice will inevitably talk about returning to your work after this hiatus with fresh eyes. I'd like to ask, but what are these fresh eyes? I mean, it's not like we're taking eyes and replacing our eyes with other eyes or something like that. You don't have like magical glasses that you can put on and then suddenly see everything. That's not what's happening here, right? So what's supposed to be happening? I think the idea is that you're supposed to get a little bit of detachment from what you've written. And I really want to ask, I mean, are we supposed to be detached from what we've written? Is that a good idea? Because I'm not convinced it is. Is my fire hissing? Can you hear that? I hope you can't hear that. We'll see later. Ah, the joys of winter. You see, if I were just a normal person and I lived in a modern style apartment, then I wouldn't be having these difficulties, and neither would you. You can thank me later. Where were we? Fresh eyes, that's right. I think I need to step away from this video for a while and get some fresh eyes on it. We'll see. So what's the real background idea here? The idea is that when you come back to your manuscript after this time, you can start to read it as a reader would read it, or as an editor would read it. You're suddenly no longer the author of it in a certain sense, or at least you're able to put yourself more into that kind of a third-person perspective and to look at your work from that perspective. So there's a presupposition here already that we need to make ourselves into readers or editors to adequately edit our manuscript. And I want to challenge that. But in the first place, I'd like to ask, even if it is true that to some extent we do gain a new kind of vision when we come back to our manuscript after all that time, what's the cost of it? So in the meantime, when you've set your manuscript aside for these months and you've moved on with your life, you've lost your artistic momentum, right? That propulsion which keeps you moving through the writing process as you're actually drafting. You've probably, if you're anything like me, forgotten any number of details about your work so that you're going to be a little bit lost when you come back to it. At least I hope I'm not the only one who suffers from these kinds of memory problems. And you probably moved on to a new project, which is now absorbing the lion's share of your artistic and creative attention. So you come back to your old project, weakened, dazed, and divided in your attentions. And this is supposed to be fresh eyes? I want to challenge the entire premise behind this abandoned manuscript tactic. The basic idea is that you're obliged to get distance from your work. But I want to ask, I mean, really, are you? You are the writer of this work. You are not an independent editor of it. And no matter what you do, you will never be able to put yourself into the perspective of an independent editor. The editor comes from your manuscript from the outside. right? He is looking in on your work. He is looking at the writing and he's moving his way inward. The writer begins from the inside of his project, right? It becomes from an inner vision, an inner intuition, or an inner inspiration about what you're supposed to be writing, and you move outward from there. These are two completely different movements. And the idea that we somehow have to get outside of our work and then try and come back at it is actually going to cause a lot of problems for us. And here's why. All of the things that we've listed as being difficulties when we come to the end of our drafting process are actually owing to the fact that we've already been, to a certain extent, alienated from our original vision of what we want to do with our writing. So you come to the end of this drafting process and you're looking back at your work, and suddenly the text of your work is standing between you and the original idea that you had. All of this stuff that you've written, these things that you've accumulated, scenes that maybe don't actually have any real purpose in the context of your project. All of this is standing between you and what you're trying to get at. And the advice that's given to you is just going to push you further away from that central core of what you're trying to do. It's like saying, here's the vitality of your writing, right here at the center of it. And I want you to go as far away as you can from that vitality so that when you come back to it, you can somehow attach to it more directly. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, putting time and space between you and your manuscript is only going to aggravate the fundamental difficulty that you have as a writer, which is how to get back to that core, that spirit of your work. So I want to tell you my experience with this because I've tried this with various books that I've written. Every time that I go away and I come back, I always feel a little bit like I'm looking at something I don't quite understand in the same way. It takes me a while to get back into the spirit of it, if I even can completely reconnect to that spirit. The entire experience feels a little bit alien to me, and it takes a long time just to bridge that disconnect between where I used to be when I was writing and where I am now when I'm in a completely different headspace, mental space. I'm living in a different world. My life has moved on. I'm occupied with different things that are not necessarily connected to what I'm doing in that book. I haven't gained any neutrality about it. I'm still looking at something which I know intimately because I've built it. But that intimacy is somehow attenuated. It's missing in the same way that I had it before. So it's like I put myself into a perspective in which I've added to all of these basic problems that I have as a writer, all of the disadvantages that I would have if I were coming at this work from an external point of view. I no longer have that intimate, emotional, and sentimental attachment to this work in the same way that I did before. I've cut myself off from the very vitality of the creative flow. Now, I know that this approach works for some writers. I mean, it was popularized by Stephen King, and I have to suppose that Stephen King knows a thing or two about writing. I understand from what I've seen on YouTube, for example, that there are many authors who find this a very favorable approach. And more power to them. I don't want to change anybody's way of approaching their writing if they find that it actually works. Each writer is different, and each writer needs to find an approach to self-editing which works for him. I mean, you do you, bro, man, dude, whatever it is the kids are saying these days. Yeah, my fire's down again. Excuse me a moment. You can even see how well it's working because I'm still able to see my breath. Fantastic. See, you came here looking for a video on self-editing, and what did you get? A glimpse into country life. Here we are. I guess I can just pretend like I'm some kind of an editing dragon or something. But no, really, coming back to the point, I am not here to tell anyone what they have to do with their writing process or what they should do with their writing process. I tried this approach and it didn't work for me, and I know other writers for whom it also didn't work. I also know writers who feel like they are obliged to step away from their manuscript because that's the going advice, and even though they really don't want to, they really want to keep going with the editing process immediately, they force themselves to detach because they think that it's better for their work. So I want to send this message out to that kind of a writer. The kind of writer who feels like he's severing a limb when he sets his first draft on the shelf and steps away from it for weeks or months, but who does so anyway because he feels like he has to, because everywhere he looks, authors and editors are giving him the same message that this is what's done, this is the way to do things. I'm here to tell you there is another way. For some of us, it might be a better way. I'm going to give you a new approach to self-editing which will let you work through your manuscript, work through your first draft the moment that you've stopped writing it, without taking any breaks, without the lockbox thrown into the sea. This is an approach which works not from the point of view of the editor, but from the point of view of the writer. It doesn't try to come at your work from an external objective perspective, but it tries to use all of the strengths that we have as writers to work through the manuscript in a step-by-step and sensible way, in a way that actually works with our creative flow and that produces the same effects that we'd hope to obtain if we were to move outside of our manuscript and work back at it from the outside in. In fact, in my view, it could obtain even greater results because you are working again from your native creative instinct rather than from some kind of a point of view that you're never going to be able to fully embody or obtain because it simply doesn't belong to you. And this is true even if you're an editor. I'm a professional editor and I still find difficulty reading my work as a professional editor would do. I am too close to it. And that, I want to say, is an advantage. It is not a problem. It is one of our strengths. It is not our weakness. We just have to learn how to take that force, that innate power and strength that we have as writers, looking at our work firsthand. We have to use that in a way which is fruitful and productive for the entirety of the self editing process. So, in the coming weeks, I'm going to be setting out some videos that I've already recorded, so they're ready to go. And I'm going to be putting these out to show you, to take you step by step through this process that I've developed, through this self editing strategy that I've produced for writers. I hope that I can give some of you the ability to avoid the pain of severing yourself from your manuscript prematurely, stepping away from it a long time, and then coming back to it only to feel like you don't quite recognize it anymore. Because I've been there, I don't think we need to go there. So I hope you'll join me for this course. I think you might find it interesting. Please check me out also on X or Twitter or whatever it is you prefer to call it. I will also be publishing my thoughts on a great many related topics there on a day-to-day basis, if and when I can manage it. And I'm not too busy tending my fires, for example, which is a very time-consuming business, by the way, for, as you can see, not great returns. I wonder just how much of my life has been burned away literally with the firewood. However, it's really a rather contemplative process, and it gives you a moment to detach from the affairs of the day and to just focus on the things that really matter. Good. So this has been a confused and rambling video. I hope that you've gotten something from it. If you have, and if you'd like to see where I'm going in the future, please follow me here on YouTube, ring that little bell, smash that thumb. That's not what they say. And in any case, please do follow me here. Please share your experiences. I'm very curious to hear from you authors about what you think about the various approaches that are taken to drafting and to editing. And in this particular case, do you think that it's useful to step away from your manuscript? Have you tried this? What were your results? Was it something that helped you? Was it something that hindered you? Let me know down below in the comments. Not only is this just a personal interest of mine as one author to another, but I'm also just very curious about this because I think it will help me to better develop these ideas that I have about self-editing. And maybe we can even come up with some new approaches that haven't been thought through yet. So with that, thank you so much for joining me for this really, I guess, second video to this new channel. First non-introductory video. You see, if I were a better editor, I would have gotten rid of all of this extraneous material, and this video would be much more cohesive. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks and farewell.